God be with you.
And
Also
also with you.
Let us pray. God of life, we give you thanks that you have given us ministry that we share in this diocese. We ask that you would be with us in our conversation today. Help to guide us with wisdom. And we ask especially that you would be with our diocese as we gather for convention this weekend. It is good that we share this work, and to you we give glory. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to join us for this convention hearing. And as we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded for the benefit of folks who cannot be here. So if you would prefer, feel free to turn off your camera. And if you'll please remain on mute unless you are speaking so that we can have the cleanest audio possible. I will acknowledge my own role in possibly not supplying clean audio from the fact that I am sitting outside of a Cadillac dealership in Evansville charging my car. So please forgive any road noise. The reason I say that this hearing may be quite short is that we have received no legislation for this convention. So typically at this meeting, we would have an opportunity to go over the resolutions that are coming before us and be able to talk through those and maybe prepare ourselves to potentially amend and improve resolutions. But we have not received anything. So one thing I do want to note, however, is that it would be in order for resolutions to be submitted from the floor. And I wanted to go over the process for that if anybody on the call may be interested in submitting a resolution from the floor. Would there be interest in addressing that topic? If so, just signal in a way that I can kind of see you. I am not seeing anybody. So great. So then I'll go to our next topic, namely the elections for office. So we have elections coming up for Standing Committee, Commission on Ministry, Disciplinary Board, and Waycross Board, as well as confirmations of candidates for Executive Council. At this point, nominations for your bios to be included in the packet of pre-filed nominations is closed. However, you can continue to use those nomination links to be nominated from the floor in order to help the convention know who you are. If you're interested in one of those offices, you would just need to submit your photo and a bio to Kim Christopher by 8:30 in the morning on the Saturday morning of convention. I'll observe that at the moment, or at least last I checked, we had no candidates for disciplinary board. And that's a board that we don't call upon often, but when we do have cases where clergy discipline is required, it's really important for us to have good people on that board. So if you feel like that might be something you're called to, or perhaps have questions about, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Canon Juliana to speak more about that. And actually, Frank, as our Title IV intake officer, you might have some insight on that as well. Would you be willing to accept questions?
Sure, be glad to.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on elected office before we proceed to the budget?
So this will be my first convention ever.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you could just very briefly go through a high-level understanding of the different offices that are electable, or however that works, or if there's some understanding of that in the packet that will come out, I can easily read it there too if we don't want to spend time on it today.
So thank you, Laura, and delighted to see representation from the table here on the call and your first convention where you have both voice and vote. We're so thrilled you're here.
Yes.
I will go through it really quickly. I'll just note that you can find more in-depth information. Actually, if you follow the nominations form on the website, each of the duties of the offices is shown in some detail on the form, even if you don't fill it out.
Got it.
But very swiftly, the Standing Committee has its core responsibilities are approving or not the acquisition or sale of any real estate. For it, they are required to approve any congregation taking on debt. And they also serve an important function in the ordination process, approving candidates for ordination and accompanying them on that process. They are also frequently called upon for kind of, call it other duties as assigned,
Sure.
but being involved in other important decisions in our life as a diocese. The disciplinary board, I think, is as I described. They oversee the disciplinary process. Waycross is our camp and conference center. I believe the tables held a retreat there once before.
Yeah.
And so that board exercises the typical responsibilities you would expect for a nonprofit board. And then executive council actually functions largely as a board of directors for the diocese, taking on all the responsibilities of a board you would expect, except those reserved to standing committee.
Got it. Thank you. That's
You're
really
very
helpful.
welcome. All right. Laurel Cornell, I see you here. Would you be prepared to get us started with a conversation about the budget? Laurel is not, okay, she may have,
Okay. The budget this year is pretty much the same as it's been in earlier years. So that we have, our sources of income are the apportionments, which the apportionment rate is the same as last year, and our investments and our withdrawal rate from the investments is the same as last year. And among our expenses are pretty much the expenses you see every year. We don't have any unusual expenses coming up. So that is a sort of 25-word or less summary of the budget.
Thank you, Laurel. I'll also add one other thing that is really good news for us, which is that we were prepared for a very large increase in health insurance premiums this year. So initial drafts of the budget expected health insurance increases of as large as 15%. And thanks, at least in part, to some action by the General Convention last summer in Louisville, as well as maybe just getting a little bit lucky, those numbers came in closer to about 6%. So we're very fortunate in that. Health insurance makes up about a quarter of our budget, not quite a quarter. So it's one area we just have to keep an extremely close eye on.
Thanks, Brendan, for that addition.
Yeah. Any questions or conversation about the budget?
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, thank you.
I'm remembering that the Lilly Endowment had picked up the tab for health insurance for clergy in the diocese. Is that still correct? Or
I'm not clear on whether that was ever the case. I can tell you how it all works right now, which is that we are one of two dioceses in the entire Episcopal Church where the diocesan budget carries clergy health insurance on our budget. The other one is the Diocese of Texas. And it is thanks to the generosity of the Lilly family, who bequeathed a significant amount of funds to the diocese in the 1970s, early 80s period, that we are able to do that. To my knowledge, the Lilly Endowment has never been involved, but the generosity of the Lilly family, of course, has given us the ability to do that.
Yeah, a difference there, sorry.
Yeah. That said, one thing that's just worth noting is that when that gift was first made, medical insurance costs were much different when they are today. And it was a few percentage points of the diocesan budget as to the massive expense it is today.
Yeah. Thank you, Brendan.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for the question. Other questions or comments? Yes, Frank.
I don't have a question about the budget. So is it all right if I
Well, hang on just one sec. If there are other questions or comments about the budget, please make yourself known. Otherwise, I'll let Frank move us along. All right, Frank, the floor is yours.
So I'm just curious to know, like in the past, I'm going back to the fact there are no resolutions. And there've been been conventions where there's been a lot of resolutions or things that come before the floor and things like that. And it seems like the last, I don't know, maybe 3 years or so, it's gotten lighter. We've had some constitution changes, things like that. But is there, like when you guys, maybe you and Ken and Juliana, like in your experience with that, what does that indicate? I guess, is that a good thing? Is that uh, that there isn't a lot of legislation coming forward? Like, I'm just thinking of your point of that.
Hmm.
So I'm going to I'll start that. And I'm going to add the caveat that much of what I'm about to say is personal opinion, and is not and may in some ways be an uninformed opinion. But I'll start with the fact that we have had a no legislation convention before. The last one occurred in 2013. Um, and but I think you're right, Frank, that legislation has lightened up in this diocese. I can't speak to others. I've actually never been to any other diocese's convention, so I don't know. Um, so I think there was a time in the history of the church where where conventions decided to weigh in on all manner of things inside and outside the church. And that maybe spoke to the church's cultural position at the time, or perhaps church members' views of the church's cultural position at the time. On a related note, there was a time in this diocese when our convention did a really robust response to general convention resolutions, whether or not they required diocesan action. And that has ceased to be our process. We do now respond to those resolutions when they require it. We did receive a number of resolutions that were referred to dioceses from the 2024 convention, but they did not show up until mid-October, which was just too late for this convention to act on them in any practical way. So I would expect that we're going to see some legislation in response to those resolutions at next year's convention. Juliana, do you have other thoughts on that?
Um, I no, to me, it's a neutral kind of feeling that I have about it. And to be honest, I've only attended conventions that are not this diocesan convention. So I've attended Louisiana and Mississippi and West Virginia, but this will be my first in the Diocese of Indianapolis. I do think that there is people are perhaps losing their appetite about writing resolutions that don't end up with any teeth for actual change. And I think in a lot of dioceses, there's been confusion about what a resolution actually can do and cannot do. And I think sometimes there's some frustration about lost energy around writing resolutions that don't actually impact the budget or, that sort of thing.
And
What-
this is Laurel, and
Mhm.
I want to say, I think one of the things that makes a big difference is that we have become much more transparent as a diocese in
Mm.
all of our transactions.
Mm.
So, the budget goes through this long process, lots of people talk about it. All of our programs, we're much more in touch with people in congregations than was the case in the past. So I think people just have many more means of communicating with each other, whereas in the past it might have been that the resolution was the only way you felt like you could make a communication with the diocese. So I think transparency is really something that has helped here.
That's interesting. What do you think, Father Frank? You've been around for a while in this diocese. What's your sense?
It has felt like a good thing. Like the stuff that has come up has been important as the diocese, like the parishes in the diocese, and where I've been at ones where it just felt like, oh, I'm going to throw this up. I'm going to throw this. I'm going to disagree. And there are long lines and bickering back and forth and things like that.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's gotten more, and maybe what Laura was saying, that there's a lot more communication. So by the time we come to convention, some of that has been worked out, or we know we're going to need to change. Like when we changed from the structure from deaneries to neighborhoods, or the resolution on rooting out racism, things like that. Like we come into pretty much knowing and getting geared up for it. So I don't see it as a bad thing.
Mhm.
This is my only experience of it, and so just was curious what you make of that. But thank
Hmm.
you.
I guess one other observation that I'd have, Frank, and anybody else who cares about it, is that one of the areas that I think we really need legislative attention is to our canons, which are the way that we govern ourselves. So it's not that our canons are broken, really, but they've not gotten a good overhaul for a long time. And there are certain assumptions baked into the canons that are not really where we are today. So we have reunification with Northern Indiana as a possibility before us. If that goes forward, there will be a new set of constitution and canons adopted, and so there'll be a lot of eyes on it as part of that. But that's not a foregone conclusion, and if we end up not reunifying, I think the canons of the ongoing Diocese of Indianapolis really need a good scrub, and that'll require the attention of a lot of smart people and the consent of convention.
Question for you, Brendan. This is Valeria.
Hi, Valeria.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, you talk about the scrubbing of the canons and how that needs to, you know, that starts with a convention. So if we wanted to scrub the canons, or of course, if there's unification, we're going to need to anyway. Does that mean that we would not be able to begin work on that until the 2025 convention? I'm not sure how that process works.
Not necessarily. So our rules are the rules until they change, right? So and unless and until we reunify with the Diocese of Northern Indiana, we continue to operate as we are. So anybody who had an interest could really get going on the canons prior to the 2025 convention. There are some special rules in terms of how long you need to submit the canons in advance. They need to show up 60 days in advance, so there's opportunity for the Constitution and Canons Committee to review them. But I would suggest putting a pause on that, because that right now that may be wasted effort if it turns out that reunification is where we're going and there's going to be this whole other type of work happening on the canons instead.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Seeing none, we will bring this hearing to a close. I hope to see all of you at the workshops on Friday and at convention on Saturday. And thank you all for taking the time out this afternoon to give to the governance of the diocese to the glory of God.
I
Go in
think there's
peace.
one more question, Brendan.
Oh, is there?
Looks like
Sorry,
Wendy and
Brendan.
Jody.
Wendy Blumenthal and Jody Breakel.
Hello.
Question about the workshops
Yes.
at the convention. What is the process for signing up for them?
Have you registered for convention yet?
Yes.
We
Juliana,
just got a
you might have been
preliminary.
You might have been tracking on that more closely than I have.
Actually, if you have registered for convention, my understanding is that we assume that you will be there for a workshop. There had been in the registration form a place where you could specify your preferences, but you can attend regardless of which preferences you specified. Does that make sense?
Follow-up. Are
Yeah.
all of the workshops presented at each time slot?
No, there are different time slots. And Brendan, it's making me wonder, maybe we have not yet put the times up.
No,
I
the
think
times
we're in
are
the
there, but
process
not
of-
what the session is about.
Okay, we were in the process of finalizing those. I will check on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, yeah, please keep an eye on the convention website. We'll get that up this week if it's not there now.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you all. Go in peace, love, and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to
Be to
God.
God.
Thank
Thanks
you.
be to God.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, everyone.